Hi, this is Daniel Crawford, and this is Bell to Bell, the YouTube show that is sort of a partner for my podcast, Extra Extra Wrestling Today. So, it's been a while since I've been able to do one of these shows, and the previous show was right after Survivor Series. Of course, later on that week was Thanksgiving, so that's the reason why I haven't been able to do anything, because holidays and whatnot. So, let's get on with the show, though. So, today is December 7th, 2020, and we're going to talk about my review of the past 2 weeks of wrestling since I last had a show. Let's just start from the top here. Number 1, the top 5 matches of the past 2 weeks. Now, there were quite a few really good matches, at least one of which maybe a couple that were on AEW. I wanted to give a mention to the match between John Silver and Adam Page on AEW, but it didn't make it into the top 5. Another honorable mention goes to the match between Shotzi Blackheart and Raquel Gonzalez, which was a really good match. It's just it didn't quite make it into the top 5. So the top 5 matches, starting with number 5, Randy Orton versus AJ Styles to determine who would go on to the triple threat match that we just saw this past Monday, or last week on Monday on Raw. For the number 1 contender for the WWE Championship. This was, I thought, a really good match, definitely deserving to be in the top 5. Of course, it ended with The Fiend sort of distracting Orton, paving the way for that feud, and I'll talk more about that feud momentarily. But after this, kind of a surprise, kind of a sleeper match, I think, but it was a really good match. Definitely got a 10 from me, was Slapjack versus Ricochet. This was almost like a throwaway match, but those two really brought it during that bout, and I really enjoyed it. And if you haven't watched it, if you're really into watching just like random matches that are really good, I suggest you watch Slapjack versus Ricochet from that episode of Raw. And I believe that was the most recent episode of Raw, November 30th. After that, we have number 3, Pete Dunne versus Kyle O'Reilly for the War Games advantage. This was on the, November 25th episode of NXT. And this was a really good match between Dunne and O'Reilly. I thought, it kept me invested throughout the whole thing. It was exciting. And, of course, Pete Dunne won because of the help of who we are led to believe is Pat McAfee. So that was enjoyable. Number 2 is the men's War Games match. I really enjoyed this match. War Games was just an all-around awesome show, and NXT is always really good about doing that, giving you their very best. But this was a really awesome match. Now, my favorite match of this whole 2-week period was the women's War Games match. Excellent, just like the men's War Games, but it's just, this thing told so many stories. I mean, the men's War Games match also told a lot of stories, but the women's War Games match was brutal where it needed to be. It told all the stories that it needed to in a way that made sense. It didn't feel like chaos at all. It was structured chaos. It was chaos that needed to happen when it needed. I mean, same thing with the men's division, but with the men's War Games, but the women's War Games just did it better, I guess you can say. So, just excellent all around. And it actually, both War Games matches surprised me because the opposite team won that I predicted would win. So, in this match, I thought that Team Shotzi would win, but actually Team Candice LeRae won. In the men's War Games, I thought that Pat McAfee's team was going to win, and that that the Undisputed Era was going to go on to the main roster, but I guess they're not ready for that. So, those are the best matches of these past 2 weeks, and I invite you to go watch any of them because they were all excellent. Number 2 here, best backstage of the past 2 weeks. This was difficult because there were a lot of really good backstage stuff, but the best one I think that stood out for me, and I guess it wasn't as difficult as what I'm making it out to be because it kind of ran away with it by a mile. But not that all the other backstage stuff was crap, but this was just really good. And I loved the Firefly Funhouse edition about friendship, which preceded the match between Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. And I almost put the match of Bliss and Cross in the top 5, but I had to consider match length and everything told, so I kind of got knocked down a few pegs. But I still gave the match a rating of 10 because there was just so much great story told. I mean, Alexa Bliss is in her element right now. She's just doing so good. And she's one of my absolute favorites, and it's for a reason. And this rule where she's possessed by the Fiend is just, or maybe even just Sister Abigail, it's just awesome. So I'm thoroughly enjoying it. That match was really good, but the Funhouse episode that happened before that match, that talked about friendship, where they introduced this like walrus or whatever, that it wasn't a walrus, it was like a toad, that's right. But they killed the toad or frog, whatever the heck it was, and that part, you saw how demented Alexa is getting. It was definitely enjoyable, one of my favorite parts of wrestling for the past 2 weeks, so definitely really good. The best show of the past 2 weeks. So when you include War Games, there were a total of 9 shows over the past 2 weeks. So that was Raw from the November 23rd up through War Games December 6th, last night. So the best show, and it came down really to two shows really stood out and actually earned a 10 for me because they felt perfect all the way through. Like, I don't know how they could have done better with what they had on hand. That was Raw from November 23rd had a 10, and War Games had a 10. But War Games is ultimately what edged out because how solid it was, everything how it was delivered. Like, it just kind of edged out Raw. And, you know, kind of went a little bit more than edging, but you know what I mean. It beat Raw. So, yeah, War Games was the best. But here are my ratings for each of the shows. Once again, November 23rd Raw was a 10. NXT from November 25th was a 9.86. AEW from November 25th was a 9.63. SmackDown from November 27th was a 9.78. All the shows, well actually no, yeah, I guess all the shows kind of went down a notch the next week. On November 30th, Raw was a 9.75 for me. NXT from December 2nd was a 9.77. AEW from December 2nd was a 9.42. I'll explain that in a moment. And SmackDown from from December 4th was 9.77. So SmackDown from December 4th actually tied for me with NXT from December 2nd at a 9.77 each. But in that case, NXT would edge out SmackDown. So, and of course, TakeOver had a 10. So why have I now been giving AEW consistently like the lowest rates of all 4 wrestling programs each week? It's a lot of it has to do with their backstage stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, WWE is definitely not perfect on all their backstage stuff, and it's certainly not perfect on all their matches. AEW has really good strength when it comes to like their tag matches and their singles and men's division. They really get dragged down for me though when it comes to their women's division. It's just I hate to say it, but I've stopped caring about the women's division in AEW. Like, it's not the women's fault, it's how AEW does their crappy booking of that division. And this, I don't think it's acceptable, especially for a company that calls themselves the Elite. Why call yourself the Elite and then you have a really crappy women's division? And I'm not even sure they can even save it at this point. I don't care who they bring in. Like, I just don't care about their women's division. And they obviously don't care either because they only do one women's match each week on Dynamite. They don't even try to have a second match. And they have like a stupid little backstage segment involving the women. Like, poor Sheeta. Like, she's one of my favorites in the ring, but promo-wise, I don't take her seriously. And I hate to say that, but I don't. So when I see their women's division, I almost completely tune out because I've stopped caring. Also, this past week on Dynamite, we saw some really hyped up things, but also you saw some things that kind of dragged it down for me. Like, granted, I enjoyed seeing Sting's arrival. That was great, spectacular. But at the same time, this is one of the problems with the internet. Like, a lot of us have seen it coming for a while. Like, there was a lot of speculation that Sting was going to arrive at Full Gear, but he didn't, which was cool, because it could put it off for another moment. But then he showed up at Dynamite, but it's like, he came up and he just kneeled down and just stared at Cody and then stared at Darby Allin, like, for a while. And I mean, he got a baseball bat, looking intimidating, like, and you're left to wonder, like, is he going to wrestle or what? Like, I hope he doesn't wrestle, because he wasn't clear to return to the ring in WWE, and they have, like, some of the best doctors in the industry, so I hope he's not cleared to enter the ring in AEW. That's just, I don't want him to take a chance of getting paralyzed. Maybe for a cinematic match, but I don't know, there's even a risk still there. So, and the Moxley Omega match, this was a match I was really, really, really looking forward to. But I was starting to get worried about the booking for it with some of the somewhat silly Omega segments, like I still gave them like the highest rating I can give like a promo or a backstage segment, but they were coming off as a little bit corny. It's like he's trying too hard to be what he was in New Japan. So the match itself, I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I had hoped. So I didn't give it a 10 rating, I gave it a 9 rating. And I think I may have actually given it a 9.5, but still, it's just the pacing of the match kind of threw me off. And the pacing threw me off because it wasn't what I expected from a match that we've been expecting for over a year, potentially. It was cool, the whole thing with Callis from Impact and Omega running away and then setting up for Omega to show up on Impact's programming tomorrow on Access TV. But it's just, I don't know, it was kind of weird. It was a weird show overall. And like the Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal, I hate the stipulation that the last two men go on to face each other in a singles match. It throws me off. Like, it threw me off last year and it threw me off this year. And I don't know. And I'm definitely not a fan of this whole thing with the Inner Circle teasing they're going to break up. Like, I would understand, I would accept it and be, I guess, more okay with it if MJF had joined the Inner Circle and then, like, a few months down the line it was in danger of, breaking up. But MJF literally just joined the Inner Circle about a month ago, and now they're in danger of breaking up, and it's because of Jericho issuing this ultimatum. If they don't start getting along, then they're going to break up. I'm sorry, I'm not into that, and it's really thrown me off about the whole Inner Circle, and it's seeming, there was a lot of chaos in that match with Jericho, as he was in danger of being forced to tap out by Frankie Kazarian. You saw MJF with the towel, which, is okay. It's an okay throwback to what we saw last year with MJF and Cody. And then you saw Sammy get seen by Jericho with the towel, which that was fine. I don't mind that. But it would be better in my view if it was a longer story being told over time. But the way they just kind of threw this, we have an ultimatum, we gotta get along or we're gonna break up, like that, to me that was just stupid. Anyways, that's enough of my rant about AEW. I'm getting to the point, and I feel bad because there's people out there who really, really enjoy AEW, but it's becoming more and more of a chore for me, and I'm not there yet, but I'm almost to the point where I'm just going to stop watching it altogether, just so I don't like to be a drag to other people who like it, you know what I mean? And if I'm not enjoying it, I shouldn't be watching it. That's what I think about other people who complain about WWE or any other wrestling product. If you don't enjoy it, don't watch it. So I'm almost there with AEW, but I'm not there yet, and I'm trying to give it more chances. I don't want to give up on it yet. So, moving on. Best heel moment of the past 2 weeks was, I can't stress enough how much I enjoy the Roman Reigns story. Everything Roman Reigns is doing right now. His story with Kevin Owens has also been awesome, and I'll get to that in a second. But Roman Reigns attacking Kevin Owens and Jey Uso on the most recent edition of SmackDown, the December 4th episode, that was great. Like, because you see him attacking Owens, and then you see him attacking Jey Uso all of a sudden. He's saying, like, look what you did. He's talking to Owens, taunting him, like, you're trying to break up my family. And, like, he's punishing Jey Uso for being so weak and inviting, like, having an invitation to this match that they just had that Roman Reigns forced a disqualification on. So, excellent stories being told there. I don't know. I don't see how Roman Reigns can be any better than what he's being right now. It's really, really, really good. Top quality stuff. Number 5, the fire story of the past 2 weeks. Again, Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, with Jey Uso obviously in the middle of all that. Just basically, this is more of an extension of the Jey Uso Roman Reigns story, and Kevin Owens is just kind of like a temporary obstacle. But who knows? Maybe they'll give the Universal title to Kevin Owens and then just have Roman Reigns and Jey Uso feuding over maybe Uso costing Roman the match at TLC. I don't know. You don't know where they're going to go with this, but there's so many possibilities. And this story with Owens and Roman right now is awesome too. Like, Owens is getting a lot of appreciation right now, and I really enjoy that. So, all good stuff all around. So, moving on, I forgot to update this one part here. The new star of the past 2 weeks is Leon Ruff. Leon has really taken the industry by storm, and I don't see any other superstar as being able to fill this void other than Leon, because Leon, he's really coming into his own here as of late, and they just took the North American title off of him in that triple threat match, but he's been doing such a good job, and I think they're about to enter him into a feud with Legados del Fantasma because of that match that Ruff and Priest had with Legados del Fantasma this past week on NXT. But yeah, really good stuff. I'm enjoying it, and good job, Leon Ruff, for sort of taking this industry by storm. And 2020 seems to be your year. Best promo. This comes back to the Roman storyline again. Best promo of the past 2 weeks was at the beginning of this most recent episode of SmackDown. Roman Reigns, Uso, going into an interview with Kayla Braxton. Roman tearing into Kayla, being kind of like a jerk about her interviewing skills. And then Kevin Owens coming in because Roman was asked about Owens and whether he actually feared Owens or not. And then Kevin Owens intervenes. He interjects himself, and he basically swerves this into a challenge for TLC. Roman kind of hints that he's willing to do that, but Uso says they're going to back themselves up by challenging for a match later on that night. Like this whole segment, and like Roman backing up his cousin, saying we're on the same page. Although as you see later on in the night, as I just mentioned, that they're not really on the same page. That Roman's offended that Jey Uso would put him in that position. Such a good story. Great promo. This is. The fact that it's the fire story of the week, has the best heel moment, best promo. This is pretty much my favorite story going on in all of wrestling. I don't care what company, it's all of wrestling. Nothing can compete, I think, in my view, with what's happening in this story. The only thing that even comes close to me is the Fiend versus Orton story with Alexa Bliss in there. Like that's the only thing that even comes close. So, disagree, agree, I don't care. That's just how I feel about it. My favorite commentary moment of the past 2 weeks. Here's what's odd. I've been trying to keep track of my favorite commentary moments. Kind of slacked off a little bit, but nothing really stood out over the past 2 weeks, except for at War Games. There was a moment during the Cameron Grimes versus Dexter Lumis match, a match that I also wish I could have put like in a top 10 of matches. But the Lumis versus Grimes match, Beth was saying something was bad news for Cameron Grimes, and Wade Barrett was like, "That's my line, Beth." It caught me off guard. It was my favorite commentary moment of the past 2 weeks. See, on this date in wrestling history, we have the 20-year anniversary, actually, not this date, but in this week, the 20-year anniversary of Armageddon 2000, which was an excellent pay-per-view. I remember it was one of my favorite pay-per-views when I was younger. And in this pay-per-view, you saw the amazing 6-man Hell in a Cell match, which also featured Undertaker throwing Rikishi off of the top of the cell onto a flatbed truck. Such an awesome bump, crazy at the time, and crazy even still to this day to even think about. But yeah, that was 20 years ago this week. Just think about that. Crazy. So, and please make sure you visit my website, danielcrawford.org, and listen to the podcast Extra Extra. I posted 2 episodes recently, right before TakeOver War Games, and I'm going to try and post more frequently on there. Podcast episodes, they'll be short episodes, but I'm going to try and get as close to a weekly episode as possible. But that is all for today. I thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.